Hey guys, going to take you through the worksheet that you can use to apply the prompt engineering principles. So this is something I use as a checklist. I start with my naive prompt, something that is relatively simple that I'm happy with, that gets decent results. And then I start to iterate. And this is only really important to do if you're going to be using this prompt again and again. If it's just a throwaway thing, then you're doing it for one task. Just talk to ChatGPT, do a couple of iterations. This is really if it's a serious prompt that you're going to use multiple times and you need to optimize it. So start with the naive prompt. And in this case, the prompt is, can I have a list of product names? In this case, the prompt is, can I have a list of product names for a pair of shoes that fit any shoe size? So I've come up with this amazing product, a pair of shoes that can fit in any shoe size, and I'm trying to brainstorm product names. And see here that there are a couple of things wrong with this prompt. First of all, it gives us this boilerplate text at the beginning that we don't really want. Then we have an arbitrary list, like it's numbered by 10, but sometimes you get comma separated. Sometimes you get a different number of names. It really just depends. And this isn't really reliable enough if you're going to be using this again and again. So if I'm just coming up with this one product name, that's one thing. But if I'm going to be doing it for lots of different products, that's another. And I need to make the prompt more robust. So let me copy and paste the response in there. And usually this is what I do. I keep track of what the responses are so I can see how they've changed. The next thing I've done here is I've just structured the prompt a little bit. And in this case, I've asked it for product names still, but I've given these seed words. And seed words doesn't mean anything in particular. It's a magic word or anything for ChatGPT, but it's just really a way for me to give a couple of words that I like and that it can go off, but I'm still leaving it open for creativity. So let's see what we get back. You can see it's recognized that I've given it some seed words and it's giving me names that are closer to those seed words. So you can see I've had OmniFit here, that they came back with OmniFit walkers. I'm just going to paste that in, and that's already looking better. It's giving me some direction. I can specify by changing the C words what type of names I like, and it's going to give me names that are similar. All right, so next thing I wanted to do is specify the format. And in this case, it's unclear because I've just put a colon and it can put whatever it wants afterwards. So it's still giving me the numbers. But I want something like this. I want a comma separated list. What I've done here, if I create a new session, and I've just put in a previous example and I've shown the comma separated list in that previous example. You can see that we're still not really following the format. So we're going to have to continue to improve that by adding another example. So we're just going to copy that in. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The other path we could take here is rather than just showing it, we could actually specify and say, give me a comma separated list. But let me just add this other example because that's the third principle, is adding examples. And I find that the more examples you add, the better the results in general. Okay, in this case, it has decreased the number of names here, but it hasn't given me the specific comma separated list that I asked for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit that, say list product names separated, say brainstorm. And here we go. That's much better. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this prompt and we're going to change it a bit based on the previous plan that we had. Yeah, I'm going to add that next one, planning to do as well. You can see that we iterate through this work over time. Okay. So now we have our first really decent response that's more reliable. And we don't want to go over the top with examples because one, it takes some time and some costs for me to add to come up with new examples. But the other thing is that it's going to take up token space. So if we're going to put this into a product name generator type product, then if we add too many examples, that's going to cost us more tokens when we're running it through the API. So that's another good reason to not add too many examples. The other thing is it can constrain the creativity a little bit. You can see here, I have a lot of Apple type product names. It's ice shake, ice smoothie, ice shake smoothie. This is reminiscent of how Steve Jobs would name it. And it has learned a little bit from that. But if I put a lot of examples with the I in front of it, if I add additional examples, then it might not. It might just always provide that, and it wouldn't come up with these more interesting names like VersaShoe or anything. Okay, cool. Then the next thing we want to do is just see how many examples we need to give it for it to start very specifically using the I in front of every name. If we add a couple more products in here, we tried with 2 examples and it didn't give the name, but with I, we can say refrigerator, that's yeah, and say like bar, say I bar fridge, I fridge for, and I drink fridge. All right, now let me see if it now comes back with, yeah, here we go. By adding an additional example, we're starting to get more of the names are coming back with I thing. As you can see, it's starting to constrain the creativity. And we want to test to see how often that happens. So if we run that again, so it's 2 out of 3 again. If we run that again, it's 2 out of 3 again. Run that again. Okay. See, now it's given us a bigger list of names. And actually only 1 out of 3. So we can start to test this. And you can see this is the level where you start to get into production when you're working with prompt engineering, and it becomes something where it's really important to test how often it fails. And the failure case here could be, if we always want the name to be Steve Jobs style, then we might need to add more examples in order to make sure it always does this. We can see we had just added 1 more example and it was more reliable. We can run that again, but it wasn't reliable enough. And here we go. We just have 1 with the Steve Jobs if it's shoe, the Steve Jobs style. So that's an important part of this. And when you start to use a prompt in production, like whether it's something that you're using daily for your work or something you're going to incorporate into a product, this is the step that starts to get really important, evaluating the quality. Let me just go back and take the typical example here. Paste. All right. So we're getting much, much closer. You can see we're working through, and we can also test whether this wording makes sense. We can test adding more examples. We can test changing the product name style as well, if we want. Now, the final one is dividing labor. And this is where we start to build a system or a chain rather than specifically 1 prompt. And we usually can't do everything in 1 prompt. Like I have a list of names now, but I'm not sure which ones are good. Normally a human would do that. And we've already come up with 3 good names here. But yeah, we're going to put in this extra prompt here. This is a follow on, and it's going to rate the prompts, the names for us. It's come up with the product names from before, and then it's rated them based on catchiness, uniqueness, and simplicity. So again, this is another prompt. This is a follow-up prompt. We want to be testing this too, right? So one of the things we want to test for is it rating them consistently. So iFit Shoe was rated 4s across the board. Let's run it again. 4.34, not fully consistent. 4.34, 4.34. That is interesting. It does seem relatively consistent that it's rating it 4.34. That's close enough for me to use this scale. If we were getting really different results every time, that's proof that the AI doesn't actually know how to rate them consistently. And I find that with GPT-4, it is a pretty consistent rater, whereas GPT 3.5, you cannot find it. Cool. I'm going to copy this across, and this is the final response here. And then based on the ratings, we could choose which one is best. And it looks like OmniFit Walk is the best one based on these ratings. Cool. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how to work through these principles and how I use them on a day-to-day basis. I start with that naive prompt, and 80% of the time that's fine. But then if I'm going to be using the prompt in production, I start to work down the list until I get it really robust. And I might be doing this actually with code rather than in ChatGPT specifically, you don't have to be technical to do this process. It's just a case of retrying, testing what works and making changes, and then seeing what gives you reliable results that you actually want. And that's the important thing with this type of work, because if you know the right way to ask, you can get it to do pretty much anything.